In this video, I'm going to go over all the steps needed from prep to post to get you started taking great photos in sports photography. Let's jump in. Hello and welcome to another video. So whether it's pictures of your kids you want, whether it's your favourite grassroots team, or you wanted to start taking photos and making a bit of money off of sports, then this video is going to give you everything you need to know about getting started in sports photography. So first things first is preparation. So this one will go without saying, is bring the right lens. You don't want to turn up on the day with just a wide angle lens, and similarly you don't want to be turning up with just a telephoto lens. So your wide angle lens is going to get you shots like team photos and establishing shots, and obviously your telephoto is going to get you those action shots. You'd ideally want to mix your shots up and have a bit of each. I generally start off the day with the wide angle. I get all my establishing shots, the team photo, I'll get some creative shots, things like that, and then as the game starts I'll switch to my telephoto lens and then I'll get all the action shots with that. So one important thing is to check the weather. So always plan ahead with the weather. You never know whether it's going to rain or whether it's going to be too hot. You want something that's light and not heavy clothing if it's going to be a hot day. And similarly, if it's going to be a really cold day, you don't want to be in light clothing. So the other part of that is taking a little rain cover for your camera. If you're walking around and it just starts tipping it down, you can whip that out of your bag, chuck it on your camera, your gear's nice and safe, and it doesn't take up a lot of room in your bag. So always prepare for all kinds of weather when you're shooting sports photography. On the day, you're going to want to arrive nice and early. So I'm talking an hour or more before, because 2 teams equals lots of cars. You'll want to get a good parking space. So getting there nice and early will ensure that you get a good space. There's nothing worse than carrying all your gear like half a mile down the road because you couldn't find a good space. So arriving early is one really important thing for getting your establishing shots. You want to get all those shots out of the way, get the stadium or the sports ground that you're taking pictures of, get some nice shots of the clubhouse, maybe the signs that say where you are. Getting all these shots nice and early, getting them in the bag, out of the way, gives you time to think about the shots you're going to take when you're actually taking the sports photos. The other good reason for getting there early is you're able to talk to whoever runs the club or the referee or the opposing team's coach. So if it's your kids' photos you're after, then having permission from both coaches or the GDPRs, making sure they're all filled out and you've got permission to take photos of the kids, and then also talking to the coaches and asking whether they want the photos shared on social media, whether they want you to set up a private link so they can look at them. If you're buying them, having their email addresses as well, that you can contact them later on. So arriving early ensures that. The other part of that is getting to talk to those people, the important people on the day, will give you access to the pitch side. So a lot of parents will take photos from the stands or from wherever they're standing. But if you actually approach your club, most clubs, most kids teams, most grassroots clubs will be really happy to have a photographer taking photos. And in most cases, they're quite happy to let you take photos and give you access to the side of the pitch, and you'll be able to walk up and down the side of the pitch and get all the action shots you need, rather than just being in that one static position just in the stand somewhere. It's going to set your photos apart from your average photos. So once you've established that you can walk up and down the side of the pitch, which side of the pitch do you want to walk up and down? Because the 2 elements that's going to determine which side you want to walk up and down is the sun and also the stands. Firstly, where's the sun to? Do you want the sun behind you, so when you shoot, you're shooting nice evenly lit players, or do you want to be on the other side and shoot into the sun and get the lens flares, the backlit players, all that sort of stuff? That's the first thing to think of. The second thing is, what is in the background when you're shooting? So if you're shooting towards a stand and it's got all the players in it, that picture is going to be very messy. Ideally, if there's nothing in the background, that's the way you want to be shooting. You want to shoot to the empty space because you want your players to stand out. You want, obviously, every pitch and every stadium and everything is different, so you can only have what you can have. But ideally, the lower you can get, if you can shoot up and avoid certain things, or if you've got like a clear field behind one side of the pitch, get on that side so you can shoot that clear field. So it gives your players separation from the background and it doesn't distract from the image. So those are the two things you want to think about when you are finding what side of the pitch you want to stand on. If you can get your team warming up, then get warm-up shots. It brings you into the action slowly, and then when you actually start the game, you've got the full action. It's a lot more interesting than just starting straight out with full-on action. So get the warm-up shots, and if you are friendly with the team, and if it's your kids' team, for example, walk around to the players whilst they're doing their warm-ups. Obviously stay out of the way, but you can stick to the coach, and the coach is normally in the middle of the action. Get some shots, get the action shots that you wouldn't normally be able to get because you're on the sideline. So use that to your advantage to get the decent angles. F-stop, you want f2.8. So the smaller the number, the bigger the aperture, and the greater the depth of field or the less of depth of field. So f2.8 is going to give you a really short, shallow depth of field, which is going to give you a really nice background blur. But if you're not used to this, because it's quite hard if you're shooting on f2.8 to hit that tiny little thing, especially fast moving action, then go a higher f-stop, go to f5, f10, whichever you want to go to, and then try and work down to it. ISO, auto ISO. Now what I do is I expose for the bright areas, and then what happens is on bright sunny days, for example, your cloud's going to come over, it's going to make everything dark, you're going to be exposed for the sunny areas, and you're going to get a dark image. But if you pop auto ISO on, what it will do is it will see that the image is dark and it will bump up the ISO. So for those ones where the clouds are coming over, auto ISO, and it will bring that exposure up to the right exposure. Shutter speed, as fast as you can go, as fast as your camera can go, or as fast as you can go with keeping your image nice and clean. Obviously you don't want to be like f8000 and your ISO being on 3200 or whatever your camera bumps it up to, and then you have like a grainy image. So always control it with the aperture, shutter speed and ISO. But the faster generally the shutter speed is obviously going to freeze the image, so the better the image will look generally. I go down to 320th of a second. I try and stick to 1000. I've been at 2000 before, depending on how bright a day it is. Obviously the brighter the day, the faster your shutter speed will control that light coming in. The darker the day, the slower your shutter speed. So if you're on a really overcast day, or if you're shooting a stadium which is like floodlit, you might need to push your shutter speed down a little bit just to stop your image getting that grainy look when you bump that ISO up. I bring down my shutter speed. I'd much rather have a slower shutter speed and get the odd blurry image because it was too fast than completely ruin all my images that I take because they're all grainy and they just look horrible. I much prefer have the odd, if I'm doing like a 10 every 10 photo, I'm getting maybe say 6 out of 10 that are really clean and nice. I'd rather that than get 10 crisp images with loads of noise in them. For autofocus, you want it on servo. So single point focus, I'm not sure what it is on other cameras that I use Canon. So for a single point of focus is where you're taking your photo, maybe a portrait picture, and you lock it on the eye, it will beep at you and then the focus is locked. Then you can take your image. But for a moving subject, you want it on servo, so that means it's constantly hunting or it's constantly locked on to wherever you're locked onto with your focus point, and it will keep continually tracking that focus as it moves back and forward through the frame. That way, when you actually finally take the shutter, click the shutter button, it will be in focus, or it will be focused to where you were focused. Whether that's in focus or not, or where you want it focused, is a different thing. So continuous shooting mode is going to give you the ability to take 5, 10, 15 shots all within a second or two of each other, and it's going to give you the ability not to miss that action. So if it's a diving shot, you're going to get 5 or 6 shots of that person diving, for example. If it's a header, it's going to give you you're going to be able to slow that down. You're going to be able to see the compression of the ball as it hits the player's head. If your focus is on point, that is. Quite hard to do, but continuous focusing is going to give you that ability. So burst firing shots is going to give you a lot of images to go through in post. And when you're first starting out as a photographer, you'll take a long time to edit those images, but as you get better and better and better, the more you do, the less you will burst fire, and you'll know when instinctively when to hold it down and get the extra few shots. And you'll be able to click on the action, you'll follow the action, especially if you use back button focusing, you're focused all the way through and you'll just click it at the right time. I come away with an average 300 photos. When I first started, I probably easily 1,000 photos when I first started per match. Now I'm down to about 300. So what that is it's going to give you the ability to separate your back button and your shooting button. So when I focus, I'm pressing the back button, this one, and then to take the shot, I'm pressing the front button. So that way I can hold that button down and it will focus constantly on the moving subject. I can hold that down, and then when I want to take the shot, I can just press that. That's going to give you the ability to also focus and recompose. So if it's a penalty, for example, and the ball's on the floor, focus on the penalty, focus on the ball, and then recompose your shot so you get everything in that frame. And then when the player runs into the ball, you're already focused on the ball, and then you can burst fire as it shoots through that frame. It's going to give you a really good picture, rather than trying to track the player through the shot and then maybe missing the shot. So back button focusing is going to be really advantageous to get in those types of shots. But just as a photographer, I would advise having back button focusing anyway, because it's just such a better way of shooting, I think. So I always use a single focus point as well while shooting, because I want to control what's in focus. So I know if I'm tracking a person, I'm tracking their eye with that one single point of focus, and I know that's the point that's going to be in focus, which is going to give me that ability to control what's in focus. If you've got a whole multitude of points that are focusing, it could be focusing it anywhere in the image, back and forth through different players. That's not going to give you any control, and it just makes the whole thing, you're just not going to get great photos of it. So the last thing I would say is always shoot in RAW. You've probably heard it 1,000 times before, but always shooting in RAW, because it gives you the greater control in post, because there's just so much more you can do in RAW. There's so many videos out there on shooting in RAW and the pros and cons, and there's never a con for shooting in RAW. I think that's always going to give you the better image at the end of the day, and that's what we're after the better image. So the next thing, if you're not shooting manual, I would suggest shooting in shutter priority, and that's going to give you the ability to control your shutter speed, so you can stick it on 1,000th of a second and then just leave everything else to do its job, and the camera will take care of everything else. So you've got your camera all set up and you've got your positioning all sorted, and now it's time to shoot the game. So the first thing is, whereabouts do you place your player in the frame of your photo? Well, that's easy. Always in the middle. I always put enough room around them, so I'd never zoom right into them, so I'm cutting them off. Always make sure there's enough room around them so they're in the middle of the frame, and always try not to, if you can, to keep their whole body from head to toe in the frame. If later on you decide you want to crop in, that's an option you can choose, but as you're shooting, try and keep your camera, your player, inside your frame, right in the center, using that single point autofocus. So that's where you want to position your player. Use a multitude of shots. Try and get some low down shots. Get your camera on the ground, lay down if you have to, but not during the action, because it can be a bit weird just laying on the floor. I always try and shoot the action, so I always follow the ball, usually wherever it is. If it's a kick or a throw, I try and predict where it's going to go and then try and capture the catch. So if somebody's going to catch the ball, or if they're going to header the ball, try and capture the header. If you're taking photos of your kid and your kid's not in the action as a lot, or is very rarely in the action, by all means go off, take some photos as they start running towards the ball, take some photos of them running, grab some action shots like that, back and forth between the action and your child. That's always a good thing to do. Otherwise you take a whole shot of the game and your kid's not in it at all. There's a choice between monopods or just freehanding it. I personally freehand. I find monopods restricting. I like to get down low and take shots down low, and I like to, just move around a little bit, and I find a monopod can be quite restricting. But that being said, obviously it is going to help you with stability, and it's going to help you get good shots. So you're resting that camera on something all the time like a tripod, but it also gives you the freedom to move around if you need to move and recompose. That's going to give you the freedom to do that. But like I said, if I want to get down low, I find that restricts me, so I generally tend not to use one. So one thing to remember is when the action gets closer to you, you want to try and get down lower with the level of action. Zooming out, obviously, you want to be out as wide as you can go. And when the action is on the other side of the pitch, as far away from you, stand up, get as high as you can, and then zoom into that action. And that's going to give it a nice, look. Whereas if you're down low and the action's really far away from you, you're going to get too much foreground, and then the action's going to be tiny in the screen. One big thing I would say is learn the game that you're photographing. So if it's football, rugby, tennis, whatever you want to take photos of, learn the game, learn the referee signs, and learn what, when the referee's going to blow the whistle, if it's an offside thing or if it's a free kick. Knowing those things, you're going to be able to get yourself into position, because if it's a free kick and you're all the way up here, you're not here anywhere, but you're all the way up here and the free kick's happening here, and you've got to run all the way down to the free kick, and they've taken the kick before you've taken the photo. So knowing the game is going to give you the ability to get into position quickly, get the shot you need. One big tip I would say when you're taking the photos is don't chimp the screen. So what you're doing is you're taking a photo. Let's check the focus. Oh, the focus is a little bit off. Take a photo. So don't do that. Why? Why are you doing that? I do it all the time. I don't do it when I'm doing sports photography though, because what's the point? So I'm going to take a photo, 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 I'm going to take a photo. I don't need to check to see if it's in focus, because if it's in focus, it's in focus. And when I check it back in Lightroom, that's going to be a really good shot. Then I'm going to be happy with it in Lightroom. If I check the focus and it's not very good, I'm going to start beating myself up over it. But not only that, I'm missing future shots because I'm checking the back of the screen constantly. You're just going to get yourself down. Take the focus. If you think like you kind of get a photographer's eye for this sort of stuff, you can take a photo and kind of think, well, that wasn't quite in focus. You kind of know. So just keep shooting. Just keep trying to, recompose and refocus. Just keep trying to get that shot. Don't keep checking every photo you take. Half time, don't even do it then. You go half time, you're down there looking at your photos. Stuff's happening. There's team meetings, there's things happening on the pitch that you want to get, the referees having a drink. Interesting pictures, you can get lots of stuff. And if you're checking the back of your screen, you're not seeing what's going on around you, and you're going to miss some action. Don't forget to take lots of images. So me, like I said, I take about 300. When I first started, it was about 1,000. I would highly recommend taking more than you need, because again, when you get back in post, you're going to look through those images, and if you've got the bare minimum, you're probably not going to have a lot of good shots. Whereas if you've got more than you need, you're definitely going to get some good keepers in there. So always take overshoot until you're competent enough that you think, oh, actually I've got some good images, and kind of that you kind of get that feel that you've had a good day. Then maybe reduce the amount so there's not so much post-processing. But when you first start out, definitely get as many images as you can. And on top of that, with plenty of images, get plenty of different angles. So get your close-ups, get your portrait shots in, get your mid-range, so your waist up, get your full frame shots of just people like say for example, waiting for the ball to be kicked off. Take some close-ups, take some portraits. Get those different variety of shots in. A lot of the time, depending on the type of your sensor and how much megapixels you got and all that sort of stuff, but a lot of the time, if you take wide enough, you can crop into those sorts of pictures, and you can make something out of nothing. So that's always something to think about. But if you've got time and people are just standing around, get some portrait shots, because nobody wants to see 800 photos, all of 200 millimeters of the same shot. You want to get down low, get on the floor, get high up, stand behind something, get something between you and the subject you're shooting. Make it a little bit more visually interesting, tell a story. Those sorts of shots are going to make your images a lot better. So for post-processing, there isn't really much to say about this. Everybody has a creative processing technique that they use for colouring. The first thing you're going to want to do is adjust the horizon, because that's going to affect how you crop your image, and your crop is the main thing you want to be doing. You want to be using that crop to your advantage. Your crop is the biggest thing that's going to help you when processing your images. It's going to make the difference between a bad photo and turning it into a good photo. If you've got a photo with some fingertips cut off of it, for example, cropping in even tighter and cutting off more of the limbs, bringing in the shot to mid-range, for example, is going to make that image a lot more interesting. You're going to be able to save the image, and you don't want to just throw away an image because the player's had his feet cut off. Cropping in and bringing it to a mid-range, a waist, or even, you know, a portrait type of shot, that's going to make that image 10 times better than what it would be. So using the crop to your advantage, definitely. The other thing with the crop is if your player is facing into nothing, so when you set up your shot, when you took your photo, always be aware of where your player's facing and how much lead room they've got between the edge of the frame and them. So you don't want to crop it so they're right, so it's cut in their face off in front of the shot. It's going to look awful. A lot of the time, less is more. So if you can exclude players from a photo and just leave the main subject, you've got a great photo. But then sometimes that can go in the opposite. So say, for example, you've got a player that's running with a ball and he's got his eyes shut. Excluding what's around him, it just looks a bit weird because he's got his eyes shut and he's running. But if you crop out a little bit and you reveal the player that he's about to run into and he's bracing for impact, it makes that image just so much more powerful. Always remember to try and tell a story with your crop. You want your image to be interesting. You want visually, you want to see what's going on. So if just somebody running with the ball can be a good, powerful shot, but having somebody running with a ball with 5 people running behind them can be an even more powerful shot. So always try and tell a story with your crop. So if you follow the advice in this video, you should be on your way to getting some great sports photos. That's it for this video. If you did like it, please do consider giving it a thumbs up, and if you like the channel, please do consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I will catch you on the next one.